Hello and welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art, and this is Tag Tuesday. So I am doing the evolution of a reader tag, and this was created by Spread Book Joy, and I will leave their channel linked down below. And I was tagged by Books Cause Insomnia. I was tagged like 3 months ago, and I'm just now getting around to it. Sorry it's taken so long, but if there's one thing I'm really good at, it's procrastinating. Yeah, that's the only excuse I can offer for this. We'll go ahead and get into it, and I will leave a link to her channel and video down below. All right, on with the tag. What you read is prompt 1. How has your taste in books evolved? Well, when I started reading, really, it began with chapter books. I started reading the Hardy Boys, which are mysteries. From that point, as I became older, I really held on to the Hardy Boys probably longer than most teenagers do, but I just loved them so much. But then I evolved to enjoying science fiction. I was hitting a lot of the classics like Ray Bradbury, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov. Those are into my teen years, perfect time for reading those things. Guess you could say I was your typical sci-fi nerd teenager. As a young adult, I began to branch out into more of classics. That's really when I began to have grown in my reading ability to be able to read books like Dickens and Jane Austen, the older books like that. I also really tried to get into fantasy like Lord of the Rings and Terry Brooks and books like that. I guess they're called high fantasy. And then I got to the Wheel of Time series and thought I'd give it a try. And I made it through the first book and had started the second one and got maybe a couple pages in. And I'm just like, nope, I can't do it. This book, the first book, irritated me so much. It had such a cool idea and the world building was amazing and all that, but the characters were awful. I hated just about every single one of the characters, of the main characters. And some of the supporting characters that I thought were really interesting, they just weren't enough to keep me reading. But I know many of you love that series, and I'm so glad you do, because, I don't. But I'm glad, I'm glad that it works for you. But in that reading, I came to realize something about me is that I felt like I had to like fantasy. And then it turns out, you know what? You don't. I love fantasy in a film. Like, I love the Lord of the Rings films. And I love many of the so-called high fantasy films that have come out. I haven't watched Game of Thrones or anything. I don't think I'm going to I'm not going to either. Honestly, for me, what ruins it is the treatment of women and just the overabundance of sex in that show. It's just, to me, that ruins it. But I think we've established by now that I'm something of a prude, which is why I love Victorian novels. So there you go. But I like fantasy better as a film. I don't know why it is, but that's just the way I enjoy it. And once I became to realize that about my reading, and that it's okay to only like it in one medium, that was like a weight off my shoulders. Now, there are some exceptions. Along the way of reading fantasy, I came across Harry Dresden. Turns out I really like Jim Butcher's world building, Jim Butcher series of Harry Dresden, where it's like a mashup of mystery and fantasy. It's like if somebody took Han Solo and put him in Lord of the Rings, and then transferred that whole thing to a 1930s private eye novel, at least how the story starts. The books start that way anyway. But it is a fantastic series. And I think what carries me through in that is how much I've grown to love the characters. And that I am hooked on that series. I will read it and read it multiple times until the end of time. So that was really enjoyable. Another exception would be Harry Potter. Although that, again, is different from like your Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings type novel. So maybe somebody can help me figure out what that says about me as a reader, because I'm not sure, other than I just don't like it. And so that's been cool though, to read and develop and grow and learn what you do like and what you don't like. And so right now, though, it's kind of gone back to I'm reading a lot of mysteries, and I've kind of slowed down a lot over the years on my science fiction. And I'm starting to revisit science fiction now, thanks to a couple of Booktube channels I've just started following. But then I'm of course reading classics. I'm reading a ton of classics. It's almost a renaissance right now of all the Victorian classics and different books from that time period that I've been able to find thanks to Booktube. And then nonfiction has also kind of evolved over the years. I started off not liking nonfiction at all. I thought it was boring because it wasn't telling me a story. It was just telling me facts. But then I discovered writers who could actually write nonfiction, guys like David McCullough and his John Adams biography was beautifully written. And they began to realize that history books tell a story, and they tell the story of people who have died or people who have had no voices in the past and have now found a way to have their voice made known. Yeah, so I really was interested in history for a while. Then it kind of quickly got into reading a lot of books about war, especially World War II. I was quickly becoming a dad, reading dad books. There's a joke going around that says, for men as they get older, you either become really interested in smoking meat or really interested in World War II. Well, I became really interested in World War II and the Civil War. And I read a lot of books like that. I had started trying to read biographies of each president. I didn't make it very far for a variety of reasons. But I thought it was a unique way of looking at history from, the presidential perspective. But then as I started seeing, who we were electing recently, and I thought, you know what, I don't want to read about them. So I kind of gave up on that project years ago. Yeah. So right now, I kind of follow where my whim takes me. I still will read the occasional war book, but it's gotten to be where I don't enjoy those as much. I'm glad there's stories being told, but I read a book recently called The Timid Marine, and I think it really helped sum up a lot of my thoughts on the problem I see in a lot of these books, and that is how we treat soldiers. Is this really the best way to fight a war? And I want to be careful about those books that would promote and glorify violence, because it's not. Some of my favorite memoirs of war are the ones where, they are very honest of how broken it is and how wicked and evil war is. And then there are some that seem to almost glorify it, like, the manlier you are, the better, and the more guns you can hold and shoot, the better, and that your worth is based on how tough and scrappy you can be in war. But it's I don't know. Right now, I find less interest in that. Not to say I have any less gratitude. In fact, one of the things I really appreciate about reading so many World War II novels or nonfiction books and hearing the soldiers' accounts is it humanizes the war for me. It puts a face on those soldiers. So it helps me to better understand the sacrifices they made for my freedoms. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. Some of the books I've been enjoying lately in nonfiction are books about like nature exploration. So, stories about mountain climbers or people who have hiked the Appalachian Trail or the Coast Ridge Trail, whatever it's called there. There are the Pacific Crest Trail. Well, you know what I'm talking about. The really long trails, the long hikes, people that get into nature. I've really, really enjoyed those books over the last few years. Michael Palin of Monty Python fame has a great series of books and actually TV shows based on some of his world exploration, and I highly recommend them. I was surprised that somebody as goofy as Michael Palin could write something so beautiful and so serious about the world he explores. So I'd recommend that. And then memoirs that are like a biography of old authors or people, and yet it's the author's memoir of how they have experienced learning about that person. So books such as Mrs. Gaskell and Me, The Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory O'Meara is another good one like that. She writes about her experiences in Hollywood as well as the lady she writes about. And I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but it's a really great biography / memoir. And then I love reading books about books, whether it's fiction like The Reading List or nonfiction like, just about any book you could bring up that talks about books and the importance of reading and the celebration of literature. I think it's great. I have several bookshelves full of biographies of Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, Elizabeth Gaskell starting to build up. And I'm really looking forward to reading more about some of my favorite authors. And that's another, I think, direction my tastes have gone. Again, when I was younger, I found biographies boring, but now I find them really fascinating. So that's maybe a lot longer of an answer than I was expecting to give, but my tastes have evolved and they continue to evolve. And so I'm kind of excited to see where it will lead me next. Number 2, how you read. Has the format of your reading changed much? Not really. I like books in, paper format. That's fine. I certainly don't mind that at all. I like books on Kindle. I don't mind those. I won't read them on my phone. The screen's just too little. I just don't like it. I think probably really the only way that's really changed for me is audiobooks. Again, when I was younger, I didn't like audiobooks that much. I was kind of bored by them. As I've gotten older, I've enjoyed them more, especially working jobs where I had a lot of time to listen to audiobooks. But then it was really around the pandemic time and about a year before I really began growing in my interest in reading audiobooks. And then my wife told me about this little hack that if the readers are too slow, you can speed it up a little. And so I've started doing that. And if I'm not careful, I'll speed it up really fast and realize, oh God, I'm going too fast. I need to slow down. I need to go back. My reading tastes have changed a lot since the pandemic. And I'm not sure why that is. And it could be because of my increase in audiobooks. I know the last couple of years, I've read a couple hundred books every year, and over half of them have been audiobooks. And now it's getting to be where if I see a book isn't in audiobook form, I might actually, I've been known to not read it until I can get the audiobook. But I do love audiobooks. I think it's great to have a story read to you that I can do something like go for a walk and pop on an audiobook, or if I'm driving, I can listen to an audiobook along with podcasts and things. Prompt 3 says, how much you read. Do you read more or less than previously? When do you read? Has how often you read changed? So yeah, it seems almost like every year I've been able to read more than the year before. Again, part of that is an increasing interest in audiobooks and how, before you'd have to have like a CD player to listen to audiobooks, but now you got them on your phone and you can adjust the speed and all that. So yeah, it's definitely grown. I've already hit 100 books this year. I hit it in June. Again, well over half of them have been audiobooks. Even on some of my strongest reading years of reading physical books, I don't think I could have read that much that quickly without my eyeballs falling out of my head. So, so when do I read? I pretty much read all the time. I like reading in the morning, especially if it's a harder book to actually physically read. My mind is more fresh. I've got my coffee with me, and that's usually when I'll read like my Victorian books or a biography or something that's a little more dense. I'll do that in the morning when my brain is fresh. And then question 4, how has Booktube changed you as a reader? I have tried a few books that I would not have read if I hadn't been on Booktube. I did a couple of buddy reads of books that I don't think were my normal favorite I pick up, but I don't know if I could say I really thoroughly enjoyed them. One is one I just read recently, and I hopefully will have the review video out. That is Demon Copperhead. That's a book that I never would have read if I hadn't been on Booktube, and I'm glad I did. Maybe it's not going to be one of my all-time favorites, but I'm glad I read it. It was what she had to say was really good. But overall, I still think keep to reading the kinds of books that I'm still interested in. It has helped me to find new authors in the field of books and in the genres of books I still like to read. So I've been able to find new mysteries, new science fiction, new Victorian classics. Is that an oxymoron? But authors I never would have heard of, or who might not get as celebrated as guys like Dickens or Trollope. That's how I really came to discover Elizabeth Gaskell, is through Booktube. I don't know if I ever would have picked her up, or at least had a community to engage talking about her to help me grow and change in my appreciation for her. So that's been really neat. So overall, Booktube has had a very positive influence on my reading. And in some ways, it's helped me to slow down my reading. I know some people say Booktube has increased their reading, but I've actually had kind of the opposite effect, to realize, what, I'm not going to get to all the books in my lifetime. So take a minute, breathe, slow down, and enjoy the books that you have. And that's been really, really great. The fifth prompt is to tag somebody, which I'm just going to say, if you want to do this tag, you're tagged. So that'll be it for me today. Appreciate you all watching. I'd love to know how you'd answer these questions. Let me know down below. And until next time, happy reading and take care.